welcome to the Bleeding Blue and White podcast. This podcast I'm making just to give an alternative point of view to what the media presents and to look at different ways of thinking about how a team is managed, how team psychology works, to think about what the media is saying and what narrative they're spinning, to think about the business of the Toronto Maple Leafs and the business of hockey, and really to question these things and try to dig a little deeper into them so that we have sort of a well-rounded way of thinking about things. I tend to find that there are a couple of ways of thinking in Toronto, and I've been following this team since I was 5 years old in 1980, and these things haven't really changed, and I'm quite curious as to why they exist. One of them is there's quite a reactionary, impatient way of thinking in the Leaf, not everyone, right, but a lot of the Leaf fan base and the media, and it's gotten particularly bad with social media. And this podcast really wants to offer a slower, more well thought out way of thinking about the team. I'm not going to get every single detail right. My ideas and opinions are there for questioning. And really, if you find things that are off or you don't agree with, I really think it's great if you can put them in the comments, because then I can have a more well-rounded way of thinking. And if there's some errors in the way of my thinking, it would be good to know. So I think we need to be sort of open to these kinds of things, right? So there's this reactionary thinking. One of the biggest examples of this is when players come up. So there's a few issues around this. When players come up into the team, there's a lot of pressure on them, and if they don't perform, they get picked apart very, very quickly. I'm thinking of someone like Luke Shen, who ironically, everyone, I mean, there's a clamoring for Luke Shen to come back and save our playoffs, which, is an extraordinary position to be in 5 years down the road through, Kyle's tenure. And it's extraordinary as well, because I clearly remember him being a scapegoat for the team. And now I think to get JVR for him was an excellent trade, but that's sort of another point. But he's an $800,000 a year player in Vancouver, and he's got a cup with Tampa, which makes him very interesting. I mean, it's something to look at later, but if you've got a cup after you've left the Toronto Maple Leafs, why is it that you were sent packing? And perhaps this is a third point. I'll get to the second one in a minute, but why is it that so many ex-Leafs thrive? And it's, down the ages, it's been this way. The only time I can remember when it was different was when Cliff Fletcher was the general manager. In 2003, I wasn't following as closely, so I've got to go back and do that research, but maybe someone can tell us, was it the same? I think of guys like Vincent Danfus and Steve Sullivan, and I mean, on and on. And in the last 5 years, there's a ridiculous number of them, and we'll look at them in the first video I post. But this video is just sort of an introduction, and we want to think about the team, how it works. So to give an overview of what the purpose of this podcast is. The second line of thinking that I find really interesting is optimism, and really overly optimistic attitudes. So overestimating what some players are capable of, but I think of especially the most recent one is Ryan O'Reilly. Ryan O'Reilly. So the initial excitement is there, and everyone wants to be excited about it. And I understand that he's a successful player, and he's got some fabulous skills. Um, but there's a lack of sort of critical thinking, I suppose, is what I want to get at. And because everyone, I don't know why, this is sort of another point to look at throughout the history of as this podcast goes along, is where did this attitude that everything has to be positive come from? And if you're not positive, you're not a Leaf fan. Well, the best universities in the world are founded upon critical thinking. And there is a very clear distinction between critical thinking and negativity. So, when you're negative, you essentially hate everything. And when you're critical, you question things. And this is the bedrock of Western society that was handed down to us from the Greeks, So I would really like to speak against this kind of thinking, to be honest, this sort of um, demand that everyone be positive, and you're not a fan if you're negative. Well, there's a difference between being critical and being negative, right? For example, you can be positive about particular players on the team. Let's say Sammy's performance this year has been very good for what $1.5 million player who that doesn't really have a full season behind him, who we're going into the playoffs with. That's great. That's a positive thing. The critic says, why did we pay 4.5 million for Murray? And the reactionary thinking says, in November, December, when everyone was calling everyone, but people were calling Dubas a genius for signing these two. It's counting your chickens before they hatch. I mean, if we're lucky and Murray comes back and gives us a 25-win playoff run and we get a cup, hey, he's capable of it if he can stay healthy. He's an excellent goalie. I think he's better than Sammy. But again, like that's overly optimistic, isn't it? Oh, we've solved the goaltending problem. Well, the critical side says, yeah, but Murray is injury prone. How does that work? We're then relying on luck rather than, for sake of comparison, Vasilevsky in Tampa Bay, who doesn't rely on luck. He relies on big 7-game performances. And the team knows that he's going to give them a fighting chance of winning every time. Whereas, go back to Jack Campbell, we're like, ooh, there's a few soft goals in there. Now we can't blame everything on him, just like we can't blame it on Freddie. But, being overly optimistic. So Ryan O'Reilly has shown up and we're now going to go on a cup run. So I think that's overly optimistic. I think that O'Reilly does not paper over the cracks of this team. And without getting into any of this too deeply, the cracks, Morgan Rielly versus Victor Hedman. I mean, there is no comparison. Goaltending versus Tampa Bay, no comparison. Start there. And those are, Justin Hall versus, I don't know, Tampa's sort of 6th and 7th defenders. Perhaps that's a question. But then you look at what Boston's done with their defense, and you say, okay, the Leafs get into the second round. Hello, Boston. Does our defense give us a chance at a cup run? And this is what I mean by overly optimistic, reactionary thinking. Wow, we got Ryan O'Reilly, we're going to go on a cup run. Well, we could if the stars align, rather than, oh, we have this solid team of a solid goalie and a solid defense core that can chip in some goals, and then we've got enough forwards to put us over the top. It's like we're all excited about a center who's now pushing our $11 million center on the wing. Like, so that's the kind of thing I would like to take the time to think about in this podcast. And I think that where I'm going to start with it is in the first video was with Kyle Dubas in his trades since he arrived with the Leafs. And now I'm talking trades, not signings. So people tend to get them confused for some reason. And yeah, so let's have a reasonable, like, let's use, what I want to do is use this platform to have a reasonable, gentlemanly, intelligent, well researched, well thought through, critical discussion about what this team is and where it's going and where it's come from. And I think it's a very, very long time coming, because these issues, as I say, have been around since I was a kid. So it's a long time. So yes, looking forward to hearing from you, your responses. I may set up a Discord so that we can have these conversations going, because I find, in YouTube, threads get lost, and in chats, things don't get discussed fully. So I may go for a Discord with this, and I'll put up links to that, and we can have discussions there. So welcome. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you for joining and subscribing and liking and supporting. And I don't ever expect to make anything out of this financially. It is just as a lifelong Leaf fan. I would like to have a think about what this organization is doing. And, this goes up to Shanahan and his decisions, and Tannenbaum and the amount of money he's making off of your back. I think we need to, and this is, again, since the 80s, like, people used to say, well, stop going if the team is that bad. Nobody stopped going. The Garden sold out every night. So, but I think we should bring these things to light, and I think they need to be hashed out so that there is a less reactionary point of view, and that our money isn't just funneled into Tannenbaum's pocket, like fools, really. I'm not saying, and again, you can hear people saying, oh, but you're saying we're fools. I'm saying Tannenbaum's happy making his money, and I'm saying we deserve better as a team, as fans, and as a city, because we are the hockey mecca of the world. The day that a cup is won in Toronto, the city will just explode. It will be complete, utter mayhem and chaos and joy, like a Woodstock revival or something, and we deserve that. And my question is, why aren't we getting it? As a Leaf fan, I want to know why this organization has been so inept and you can say, oh, we love Dubas and we love Matthews and la-di-ba. Yeah, fine. We haven't won a round since, what is it, 2003? It's unacceptable, and I think it has to be unacceptable, and I think we need to start asking hard questions. So where are the cracks, and what are the potential solutions to them? And I think we need to demand more out of Tannenbaum and Shanny and Dubas. And honestly, I don't blame Keefe so much. He's in the same vein as sort of Dubas is and Shanny is, and follow the plan. That's been going on since, Ron Wilson, Randy Carlyle, like, you name it, So let's have a think about this team, take a step back, and look at where we're going, and what we can do as fans to give ourselves a team that competes. And I don't mean playing shinny 82 games a year and then going and playing golf. I mean, we deserve a tough-nosed, gritty, winning workhorse of a team that can compete in the playoffs. What would you call it? If you're talking cycles, maybe every 6 years. If we spent 6 years building, we should be in conference finals right now. New York made it to 2. The Islanders, like, since Lou left, what's happening in Toronto? So I think these demands need to be made of Shanny and Tannenbaum, and actually our voice, our collective voice as fans, is enormously powerful, because we can influence Tannenbaum's pocket at the end of the day. And if we do that, he may just listen. So